Oh, yogis. There you are. Hello. Thank you. Yeah. Somebody had a charge wire. The one they got yesterday didn't work.
Oh, really?
No, they gave the wrong size thing. I may not need it, but just in case. Maybe start having charge for later, in case they don't find one. Okay. Come on, just plug it in. Thank you. Oh, yeah, wait, so Geshe-la, you say you just taught the Shantideva, patience chapter? So everyone is like conquered anger, right? Huh? You did it? That's what it was about. I think the title of today is about love your enemy, right? Is that right? Yeah. So even you don't like the enemy, but you have to love them anyway. So you finished the whole chapter, Geshe-la? It's a great chapter, you know. Actually, do you also have, where did she go? I wonder if she has my Infinite Life book. Do you have the Infinite Life book? Could I have that? You know, I wrote that book, Infinite Life. It's a kind of dental, you know, meaning commentary, what they call it, meaning commentary. It's an independent book, but it's a meaning commentary on the Junjuk, you know, on the Shantideva, this one. And the subtitle I don't like, because, you know, publisher can force you to take the title. And they really didn't like Infinite Life, you know, Amitayo, you know, Tsepame. They didn't want that title. They were very against it. But I succeeded, and I want to have a picture of Tsepame on the cover, but they didn't like that, so we put the sun, you know. And we had a big argument about it, and they said, you don't want to go around promising people infinite life, do you? That was their final clincher argument. So I answered and said, no, I don't. I want to go threatening them with infinite life. Then they let me have the title. But they wouldn't let me have the subtitle I wanted, which was Breaking Free from the Terminal Lifestyle. And you see, the reason I call it a meaning commentary of Shantideva, I have a chapter on patience here. Did I call it patience or tolerance? I never can make up my mind. I will call it patience. Because you can't really get Shantideva with this life attitude. Because, you know, you have to get yourself into the thing where you'd rather die than give in to anger. And that makes no sense if you only have one life. You know, it's impossible. You know, it's like, it's crazy, right? You have to, you know, the point is that anger will kill you. Worse than kill you, it will put you in hell, you know? And so if you don't believe in hell, you know, you say, we say in English, in America now, like we say, oh, what the hell, you know? Like one translator once translated His Holiness, when His Holiness was asked a question by, if someone's angry with you, and because you did something a little wrong with them, and you apologize and apologize, but they don't accept your apology no matter what you do, then His Holiness gave a long, well, you keep trying and you do everything you can. He says, and then finally, if it doesn't work, you just say, Gyagwaso. In Tibetan. And Gyagwaso means eat shit. So, you give up finally trying to like make up to them and you tell them to eat shit. But the translator was embarrassed. The translator was embarrassed to say eat shit to translate it. So he said, go to hell. But his hosts would never say go to hell to anybody, because they think there is such a thing. But you can easily say that to somebody when you just think it doesn't mean anything, right? So the point is anger, and then anger has this definition, double definition, where on one sense everyone, like right nowadays in America, we are in a situation where we feel we need to be angry, with the oppressors, with the bad politicians, with the oppressors, it's good to be angry, and being angry will go vote and everything. So there, in a way, one a little bit agrees with them, and certainly I agree with women who feel they need to be more forceful in dealing with the chauvinists and the Me Too business, right? I agree with that. But then you have to define anger in a way where you're in control of it. When Shantideva is talking about anger where it's in control of you, right? And you all get that, right? I'm really speaking, calls to calls to Newcastle, preaching to the choir. If you just taught the chapter, what more is there to say? He taught you the 3 types of patience, right? That are antidote of anger. What? Oh, not everyone came. Oh, I see some of you are new to it. Oh, okay. Okay. So the Shantideva thing, it's in the special precept. You know the story about His Holiness. Actually, we tell the story here about His Holiness, but I didn't get it quite right. I realized I was doing an oral tradition version, and then I checked with His Holiness, and it's a little, I have something happening in the wrong place and so on. But I have the story here about how His Holiness got the special precept from Shantideva about the exchange of self and other in compassion. Do you know that one? Do you know what I'm talking about? I think I see some nods. Some of you do. And it's where is it? Early 60s. Where is it? His Holiness, escapes from Tibet, and then in the 60s he's getting things together, and he's also studying himself. And at one point, Kapche Rinpoche, his senior tutor, and Sekho Rinpoche, who was another tutor, they told him that, and that's where he kind of got the idea to do a lot of Kala Chakra initiations, right? Which is unusual for a Dalai Lama. Usually, Panchen Lama, Dalai Lama, they do, of course, in the monastery, they do every month, a certain month of the year. Actually, we're just in the new moon of the Kala Chakra time now. I think today is the new moon of the Sagadawa. Not Sagadawa, Nakbadawa, which is the Mongolian New Year month. And that's the year of the Kala Chakra. So yeah, here on page 136, Sekho Rinpoche says to Dalai Lama that there is a special Lama in Sarnath and Bodh Gaya who is not a high Lama and not well known. Actually, he's an Indian citizen. He's from Spiti, I think, Kurukulla Lama Rinpoche. And he has a special oral tradition, live tradition from Shantideva that came through someone called Patu Rinpoche, a very famous Nyingma teacher in eastern Tibet. And you should go study with that guy. You should go get that Shantideva special precept, Your Holiness. You should do that. Because His Holiness studying with all the high tutors and everything. So His Holiness does. He goes to Sarnath because Kunu Lama, his name is Kunu Lama, and he was teacher of Sanskrit and poetics at Sanskrit University at that time, because he was very good in Sanskrit, and he spoke English and German, I think, also well, because he, as I said, but he was in Tibet 40 years or something, and he would teach the Lamas poetics, and then he would go study himself. He ended up studying with that Patu Rinpoche, the Shantideva thing. So His Holiness went to Sanskrit University and gave a talk, but he really wanted to meet Kunu Rinpoche. Then Kunu Rinpoche, who we call, he wasn't an official reincarnation, but he's called Kunu Rinpoche. But Kunu Rinpoche didn't go to the event. He's scared of Dalai Lama. And then he's disappointed, His Holiness, and they're driving in the street. And then they see him walking in the street in Benares, near Sarnath. And then His Holiness stops the cortege, the entourage, and he runs out with a karak and he says, I want to study with you. You teach the Shantideva. And he bows to him in the street, and everybody, the police are freaking out, and everybody, so the dusty street. And then Kunu Lama Rinpoche runs away. He says, no, I can't teach Dalai Lama, and he runs away. And so then His Holiness gets determined, and he finds out where he lives, and he and the second Rinpoche go there, and they go up to his apartment, up a walk up, and he said no furniture in the apartment. And then finally he agrees to teach us all. So we have that story here, and then we have this thing here where His Holiness receives this special precept from which is, it's supposed to go through from Manjushri through, and textually it comes into the Ratnavali, which is translated in English nowadays as precious garland, although I think, I have to discuss that with you, Geshe-la, I think it should be jeweled rosary, Ratnamala, It should be, it's not, why, the Nagarjuna is not giving a flower garland to the king. He's giving him a rosary of jewels that he can count, learning what Nagarjuna teaches him, I think. But I don't know why they call it precious garland. But that's another story. So it goes through that, and then it's written down in Shantideva. So everyone teaches it through the text of Shantideva, this precept. And so there's Shakyamuni, and Manjushri, and then Guru Rinpoche, because it comes through this Kunu Lama, who's a Nyingma. He's in there somewhere, and and then here, the Kunu Lama is teaching His Holiness, the young His Holiness in the 60s, and then here His Holiness has a vision of Shantideva himself, right? So see, this is why we made this book, and I didn't consult His Holiness in making it, because His Holiness wouldn't show himself like that. He's too humble in his own way. I mean, he can be very majestic when he gives an initiation or something. He can be Vajradhara, right? But he's personally very, very humble, So he wouldn't show like this, because he wouldn't praise himself, But I'll praise him, because he's so great. So that's the thing. So it comes down through the Ratnavali from Nagarjuna and then goes to Shantideva. And the patience chapter, love your enemy part, Buddhists are very practical. The first antidote to hatred is not compassion, it's non-hatred or anger, In other words, you have to go step by step. Then you have to tolerate your enemy, be patient with the enemy. Even if they hurt you, you don't react with counter anger and counter violence, and then finally you might be able to have compassion, So it's the two are together. So the 6th chapter, I'm sure Geshe-la told you, the 6th chapter of overcoming hatred, anger. Actually, the word dvesha in Sanskrit is the word that translates in Tibetan by 2 words, she-dang, right? She-dang, and that's sort of like both hatred and anger. Because we think of anger as hot energy, but hatred can be very cool and malicious and scheming, and it can be very icy, right? It's not always hot. So I think she dang has both. The dang part is the hot anger. I think she means some kind of nasty maliciousness, I think. So Tibetans translate in 2 words. So we spell in English are translated as hatred anger or something like that. Hate anger. Okay. So it's a beautiful and very amazing thing, coming from Shakyamuni, of course, then through Manjushri, the wisdom side, and then, into the compassion, but through the patience. So I guess our topic today is the patience, and it's a good omen. Geshe-la, I guess they requested that topic because Geshe-la just taught the patience chapter, and it's so important, of course, because a lot of our trouble comes from being angry with each other, doesn't it? Don't we have a little bit of trouble? Maybe you don't. I had a lot of trouble. I had a hot temper, very much so. And I learned that, And so the whole psychology of it is really, really great. And His Holiness, when he gives that, His Holiness teaching of he spread Shantideva all over the world. That thing about my religion is the common human religion of kindness, for example. That is his carrying of the responsibility of the sort of special oral tradition of that. And they say a sign that you're really hearing him when he talks, when he gets into that teaching, is you begin to be unsure which person in the audience you are. You sort of get a little less self-centered, and people can have a moment of confusion, like, which person am I? Because you're thinking about other people, what they're thinking about, if you follow me, It's said to be the atmosphere, A Buddha, actually, everyone is what in Buddhist psychology, has a field mind. Do you know what I might mean by that? A field mind, in Buddhist Abhidharma, basic Abhidharma, your 18 different elements include your visual objects, your audio objects and things, and really they're part of your mind, is, what you see, the kam chobye, gemche ni, chu ni. So you're not just enclosed inside your skin, And you are a kind of cloud of energy yourself. It's your whole field of what you hear, what you see, and then what you think. And we are like, we're not that strictly boundaried the way our mind is. I'm excited about it because there was a philosopher who I had not heard of, named Andy Clark, who is a Scotchman. And he's making some theories, apparently very influential, but I never heard about him, which is my fault. But he says that he started by working on robots. And he finally explains the thing about when you lose your iPhone, you really freak out. It's like your brain fell out. But he got into the idea that the mind is not just in the brain, it's inside the skin. The mind, each person's mind is sort of invested in other people your environment. So we're all kind of field beings. Human beings are all field beings, let's say. We have field minds. And a great teacher has like a field like that. And of course, Buddha is the ultimate field mind, because when you become a Buddha, you identify with everyone as if they were your beloved. Like a mother identifies with her newborn only child, They say Buddha perceives every living thing like a mother perceives her only beloved child, they say, right? And then they get oh wow. But actually, if you've been a mother and lost sleep and been woken up and freaked out when the child is like really screaming and colic and whatever it is, and all beings like that, what a nightmare. To be hooked up with all beings like that, you'd have to have a special inner bliss that would make that possible. I mean, it's an inconceivability in a way, but it is by definition especially emphasized in Mahayana. But also, even in the Theravada, in the Pali text, some guy, like I like the story of Yashas, the first lay disciple of the Buddha, who was a yuppie. And he was out partying all night with his buddies. And was having sort of a picnic with some girls and the whole thing, and he was rolled. So he'd lost his credit cards and his wallet and his jewels, like Indian princely boy. And he was running, and he was hungover. He'd been drugged, and he comes through the forest, to the grove there, outside of Vaishali or whatever town, and Buddha's sitting there. And then he says, "Have you seen some girls running around with some jewels?" And Buddha says, "Would you rather find the girls and the credit card, or would you rather find Nirvana?" "Oh, Nirvana, of course." And he sits down, and he goes, and 18 hours later, he's an arhat. Seriously, it's a story like that. And there are different versions of it, and sometimes whatever, the literature is like that. But that means he entered a field that he'd never been in. where he suddenly had a different attention. It's completely shifted his sense of subjectivity from what he was pursuing hotly, feeling wronged and angry and violated. And then suddenly he meets this guy just sitting there. Of course, a little funny-looking guy. You know, he had an extra weird skull on top of his head and some weird long ears, and he was golden complexion. Must have been quite a thing to meet the Buddha. You know, they say that I always think of Shakyamuni as like Dr. Spock or Kirk in the new series, or Captain Picard actually, in the new series, Star Trek series, when they get into the transporter beam, and then they sparkle. They're like filled with sparkles before they disappear. So Shakyamuni is always filled with sparkles like that. And he seems to change, and there's a story that the Tibetans have, I don't know the Indian source, but I'm sure it has one, where Bimbisara, the king who was his great patron, one of his great patrons, wanted to send a portrait of the Buddha to a Persian king who was a kind of acquaintance of his, and he knew he would never get to see the Buddha, so he thought he would see a picture. So he hired a bunch of artists, and they went out to paint the Buddha, and they couldn't paint him, because they were looking at him in full beaming out mode, you know, sparkling, you know. So they couldn't paint, it was kept shifting, and the way they would see it, and they were unable to do it. So Buddha said, okay, look, my friend Bimbisara wants to make a painting of me. Will you meet me outside by a tank, you know, that's like a big swimming pool or water pond, on a windless day, and such a day, you know. And then he went there and he sat on the other side of the tank, and they saw his reflection in the water, and the water muted the brilliance of the Buddha's body, and they could paint him. It's a cute story, you know. Of course, Westerners think nobody ever painted the Buddha. They were scared to paint. They were aniconic. They didn't paint him for 800 years. They have a whole story. But they don't know anything. They don't. They really don't. They're just arrogant about everything. They think it's not in our history. Indian people didn't write down history. They didn't have a notebook and a diary, and therefore they're just ignorant natives. And we know history, so we know what they do. They weren't even enlightened because they didn't have PhDs. That's what they think. So, I mean, I'm a professor too, but I'm not a Buddhist studies professor. So, okay, so I'm a Buddhologist. That's a big difference. I'm the only one who actually has that from Harvard. I'm the only Buddhologist who ever graduated in the field of Buddhology. And I'm very proud of it. I'm not in the Buddhist studies field, in Buddhology. Buddhology means like biology, study of life. Buddhology, study of Buddha. Not some studies like some weird, funny character. I always make the difference between normal Buddhist studies professors and me and people I hope to see coming up soon, such as yourselves. And I use the Tarzan movie, Lord Greystoke. Did you ever see the one with Lord Greystoke? There's a scene in the Lord Greystoke Tarzan movie where after he's recognized as Lord Greystoke, he goes back to England, so some part of that movie, and he goes to a natural history museum, and he goes in there with some guy who's studying great apes, you know, gorillas. And in there, there's all these dissecting tools, and there's body parts of gorillas in there. And then there's a real gorilla in there in a cage, a live one. And then, of course, Tarzan starts talking with gorilla. And it turns out he's his buddy from like wherever, down the corner store, down in Congo or something. So he opens the cage, and they both escape out the window, and they're jumping around in the trees. And the British, scientist is annoyed that his specimen escaped. And then I don't remember what happened. So that's a Buddhologist is like hanging out with the Buddhas, wants to hang out with the Buddhas, and doesn't presume that there is no such thing. But unfortunately, in academic Buddhist studies, you have to presume there is no enlightened being, there's no higher consciousness. No higher consciousness than our modern 20th, 21st century professorly PhD consciousness. And that's a joke. Okay, so back to compassion. So that's what we're talking about here. This is the grounding for the compassion, this patience issue. It's the grounding of it. And without the grounding, you can't really, I love everybody, but I hate so-and-so. It won't work. So Shantideva begins, well, Geshe, you already did this, but I will go through a little bit. Whatever my virtuous deeds, devotion to Buddha's generosity, and so on. This might be a little different translation than you read, but about the same. Amassed over 1,000 aeons, all are destroyed in a moment of fury. Right? So anger is so self-destructive. And this, by anger now, I'm going to use it, meaning the one where you lose it. You lose your temper. You become mad. And even in our colloquial language, we therefore acknowledge that you lose good judgment. You become like a crazy person. And people will kill themselves out of anger. They will bash their heads in walls. They will harm people they love. They will destroy things they value, right? So they really lose their good judgment, right? So that's what we mean. A strong, indignation, a strong forcefulness against something wrong or evil, where you're in control. You might be a little hot, but you're really fully in control. That anger, the word anger, we can use like that, and then that is not necessarily to be suppressed. That's as long as it's just you're being forceful about something negative to fix it, that's all right. Your motive is something positive, okay? So that's what the people get into big arguments. Oh no, I need my anger, and etc. And particularly women in our society are told to suppress their forcefulness. And if they act a little forceful, then they don't get elected president, And because they're not supposed to be forceful, And guys are socialized to immediately be aggressive, which is their problem, our problem. But women should be more forceful. And but the key, and I'll come to that in Shantideva. Okay, there's no sin as harmful as hate. No penance as effective as tolerance. That's, the Indian mortification, tolerance, therefore, can be painful. In other words, to control your furious reactions. Thus, by all possible means, I should cultivate tolerance with intensity. And that's, as I say, I go back, patience, tolerance, I can never decide. In a way, I like tolerance has a double meaning. One meaning is you tolerate somebody because you don't really like them, and it's then considered kind of negative. You're only tolerating them. You're just supposed to love them. But in a way, tolerating is a good beginning, isn't it? And patience has this other, and the other meaning of patience is you're waiting for something to happen later. So it's not necessarily seen right away in our modern usage as the opposite of anger. So I can never decide. I don't know, you can vote. If we voted, how many would vote for patience as the thing that expresses this? How many vote for tolerance? It's very hard to decide now. In a way, the three kinds of patience in Shantideva's way of approaching it, you can use tolerance for one of them very well, and then maybe patience for the other one, for some of the others. I forget how I try to do it, but we'll find out now. Keeping the mind wounded by hate, I will never experience peace. I will have no joy or happiness, love, lose sleep, and writhe with discontent. So that's true, right? When you're really mad at someone, then you just can't stand it unless you have to do something, right? And nowadays, after this last election we had, a lot of people feel that way. And it's all stuck in their face by the media all the time. And people are very upset and distressed in the country, right? Is that right? It is right, isn't it? My wife was not upset. She said right away, oh, he won't last. It's that family's first experience of living in public housing. And they'll never stay there. They'll never stay there. So don't worry. And then it's sure enough, when he showed up down there, he said, this place is a dump. He said. And he didn't want to invest in gold bathroom fixtures, since he didn't own it. Or not yet, anyway. And temporary housing. So that's true. And actually, if you look up the root of the word anger, then I think there's some old Anglo-Saxon and then Germanic root ang, which means to feel pain, actually. So anger, it's connected to a painful feeling that you have, right? Even in English. Although, as I say, there's the two ways people have two ways of meaning anger. So that's it. Shantideva was saying, this initial part is just where he's showing the phenomenology of it, you could say. Even the Lord, whose magnanimity is vital to those he gives wealth and status, is nonetheless in danger of being killed if he has hatred for them. So that's a boss, if they were too harsh with their employees, or a lord in the old society who has some sort of dependents or subjects, even though he's a source of their livelihood, they will rebel against him if he treats them with hatred. Hate wears out friends and relatives, though attracted. Hate we don't have that same ambiguity about, right? Hate is just basically bad. Although we do say I hate this and that loosely, but everyone thinks hate is really just plain bad, I think, in English. So that's good. Hate wears out friends and relatives, definitely. Though attracted by giving, they will not trust us. In sum, there is no way to live happily together with the fire of rage. So I'm trying all the different words. But there are different words in Sanskrit too. So, then anger is my real enemy. So here's the thing about love your enemy, right? Your real enemy is anger. This is a summary. He unpacks this later. Because even if someone has been an enemy and harmed me, they did it out of their anger. They were the tool of their own anger. So it's anger itself now is the bad guy. And my anger, my real enemy, creates such sufferings as these, but who controls and conquers it finds happiness here and hereafter. I think that's true, actually. That's really true, and that's his main thing. Now, here's his little key analysis, which I love. Hate finds its food in the mental discomfort I feel, faced with the unwanted happening and the blocking of what I want to happen. It then explodes and overwhelms me. So discomfort, okay, that's frustration. So this is very key, and this is where, the women of our society should be encouraged to be more forceful by all of us. I guess the guys I'm saying when I say us, but the other women too. They should be more forceful so that they don't nurse frustration by being socialized to be polite and to be like, pretty and cute and not, interrupt somebody who's talking rot and nonsense, for example, but hear them out as they're boiling with frustration, or even keep it all internal forever and get all sick. The key there is not to have the frustration. And here he says, seeing that I should carefully eliminate that food that gives life to the enemy meaning anger, not a person. For that enemy has no activity at all other than causing me harm. So anger expressed by others against me causes me harm. Anger I myself have causes me harm. So that's it. So whatever happens, I must not allow my cheerfulness to be destroyed. Is everybody cheerful today? Don't look so serious. This is a happy moment. We're discussing the Dharma. Dharma makes you happy. Don't look serious. But we do. We're in church. We might go to hell. This is where Buddhism, and I said this last night if some of you were here, the real hard thing is to try to decide that reality is good, because we're conditioned that it isn't. And even the materialists who at least relieve you of worrying about your future life and give you sort of their authoritative certainty that all your troubles will be over at death. No worry about anything future, because the body will be gone, and that's too bad if you're really feeling buff, pumped. But when you're like me, its body's gone, okay, great. That's a cheap way of getting rid of all these pains and aches and different things rather than this and that weird operation and whatever, strange elixirs, forget the body, get a nice new one, or actually, no, don't get a new one. That's the easy way. But the other way is be nothing. And, I'm so scared of nothing. I'm not tricking you with that. I usually ask people, who's scared of nothing? People will hold up their hand. Oh, yeah, I'm an existentialist, so I'm really scared. Miguel de Unamuno, he used to go to Seville, the great Spanish existentialist. And his nurse would take him to the cathedral in Seville, and he would see the Goya-esque paintings of the hell and the sufferings and the horrible things on the walls of the cathedral. And she would say, now, Miguelito, you eat your spinach, or you're going to get in trouble. I've got these people suffering. And I would think, I'm not scared of that. I'm scared of the nada. Nothing. That's so, I mean, it's really cool of him. He's like using the nada to avoid fear of really negative state of sensitivity, pain, you know. But, you know, there is no nada. If someone said, I'm afraid of nothing, you can say that in two tones of voice. One is, I'm really afraid of nothing. That's why I'm a brave materialist and existentialist. The other one is, I'm afraid of nothing means I'm not afraid. Well, I trick large audiences with that sometimes. Lots of people hold up their hand. Oh yeah, I'm really afraid of being nothing. Then you say, I'm afraid of nothing. Rambo gets in there and says that. Sylvester Stallone. What does he mean? He means he's not afraid. So you guys are holding up your hands? What's the matter with you? I didn't do that though. You guys would never fall for that, right? So this is the thing. Why be unhappy about something if it can be fixed? I don't even like that anymore. I would say, why be unhappy about something if you can do something about it? If you can't do anything about it, what does being unhappy help? Okay? I think I'm going to change that verse though. Why be frustrated about something if you can do something about it? If you can't do anything about it, why be frustrated on top of that? Okay? How's that? That's better, I think. So this is the thing. Interrupt, be forceful, say no before you're angry, before you've nursed frustration for a while. And I only am saying that by actually she doesn't encourage me to say it, but by observing my wife over the years. She will interrupt you right away because she knows where you're going when you're being an idiot. And she'll do it with humor and a light touch where you won't just get really more mad because you didn't hear me out. And then you'll think about it and you realize, yeah, I was going into a stupid place. Like, you know, my one example I always give, coming home from a imbroglio in the office or at the school or wherever I'm teaching. You know what happened? So then she says, why don't you shut up about it before we're both pissed off? She says. And then it's like, oh, what do you mean? That terrible thing happened to me. And then, but no, then you have to cheer up. You can try to bulldoze past it, then it really gets worse. But then you have to calm down, and then you could still tell the story later in a way where it's not sharing the mood. You know, have you ever noticed you're in a good mood, you're having a picnic, you're having dinner, or you're having, pre-dinner or something, sitting there having zamba, delicious zamba. Do you all eat zamba? Do you know Gisela is a zamba fanatic? Did you know that? Do you know what zamba is? It's roasted barley powder that you put with buttery hot tea. Salty, buttery, hot tea, or you different things. You put cheese in it, or other things, or some vegan cheese if you're vegan. And then you make a little ball out of it, moist thing, and then you eat it. It's so delicious. It's a special Tibetan staple. It's really good. I like it. I just had a bunch of zamba. That's why I'm in a good mood. He makes the zamba himself. He roasts it. And when I was first a young monk in Dharamsala, at that setting house with Dalai Rinpoche and them, they had a huge iron thing there where they would roast zamba every day, you know, all the time. And underneath this funny house we lived in, it was made of tin. The house was made of tin, from ghee tin, 5-gallon ghee tins, you know, and had a tin roof, and inside were cardboard walls. It was really not like nowadays in Dharamsala. That's incredible. In the 60s, you know, in Dharamsala. Anyway, zampa is really great. I'm sorry, I shouldn't digress. So the point is, you know, do something about it right away and don't sit and nurse frustration. Tell them right away when it's silly, you know. You have intuition. You go on a blind date, you know you've met an idiot within 3 minutes. Don't wait till you have to push them off or run away or, you know, have a squabble, a fight. Just leave. Go home, go take a break. Or Watch a sci-fi movie or something, you know, Star Trek. Just take it, relax, you know. Follow your intuition. Listen to yourself. And don't ever lose your cheerfulness. That's the key thing, you see. Then, because you can do something about it, but oh, it's much better when you're cheerful. And actually, I believe this is why even with the terrible situation we have in our society by the leadership right now, like Zinke and Pruitt, wrecking the whole environment, you know, just wrecking it, just madly wrecking it. Pruitt and Zinke, that sounds like quite a team, doesn't it? Like Adam and, what is it, somebody in Costello, though. Pruitt and Zinke. They're running around first-class cabins and like signing away the national parks and wrecking everything. I mean, it's really crazy, you know. It'll all be undone, luckily. And they're all in court with the Sierra Foundation and everything. And that will happen. It won't happen. But I'm optimistic because when people protested the criminal Iraq invasion, for example, in 2003, people marched all over the world pushing their baby carriages, carrying balloons, smiling. Nobody was breaking windows. A couple guys with black hoods doing a few things, probably sent in by the other side, you know, to discredit the whole protest, you know. But people were protesting in a happy way, you know, not hating even the stupid people going to do some criminal thing, but trying to stop them and failing at that time. But the massive awareness of people in the world is against these insane things that are, where we see there still is a faction, small faction. Senator Bradley once told me, and in 2016 he told me that it's always been around 18%, the loonies, you know. Really. The ones who need a visit to Wakanda. Jeff Sessions should watch that movie like, he should just be put in a room and made to watch that movie like 50 times. Has everybody seen that movie? That's my favorite is the rhinoceros slurp. That's the moment. If you haven't seen it, I haven't given anything away. If you've seen it, you know what I'm saying. Did you see it, Gela? No. You should take Gela to see that movie. Black Panther, really, it's great. And you didn't see Avatar either. They didn't take you to see Avatar. Oh, Avatar is so great. The Indians win, and then they're nice, and they send the bad guy back on the spaceship, and you know he's going to come back. He's going to come back to get that cheese. You know the name of the mineral they were trying to get in the Avatar? You know what the name is? Guy has a great sense of humor. Unobtainium. Unobtainium. Okay, I'm sorry. Unwanted, so this is a really key thing about the power of joy, the power of cheerfulness. I think it might be the secret of the British Empire, actually, is that cup of tea, you know, cheerio, you know, and they still say it in Australia. Cheers, they all say, all the time, and they sign letters, cheers. And cheeriness is somehow makes up for the misery of struggling with the universe, you know, cheerfulness. And it's a really good thing, isn't it? Being cheerful somehow. Good cheer. Be of good cheer. Actually, you know, I like this guy, Michael Beckwith. You know, he has a church in Los Angeles called something, and he's very nice. And he likes Buddhism. And I happened to be there once, and he did a sermon, and apparently Jesus says, be of good cheer. Somewhere in one of the Gospels, in the English translation anyway. I don't know what he said in Greek or Aramaic, but be of good cheer. And he has this great thing. He says, the sermon title was All Right Already. And all right already means a different default situation. If you think about reality, and if you like Buddha, you don't have to be Buddhist, but if you like Buddha, you should acknowledge and you should know that the reason that other people do like Buddha, and there are many Buddhas, is that Buddha thought, and he argued, and a lot of people agreed with that reasonably, that reality is good. That's reality. It's all right already. We don't know that it's all right. And we're having a hard time lots of times. But if the default, if you have a kind of suspicion underneath, what is our suspicion underneath? Our suspicion is it could be really horrible. Maybe it really is. I was reading a book by a local Harvard person, popular science writer. And he was going on entropy. And entropy he makes it sound, he was quoting all kinds of people in the scientific materialist community. And entropy is just like hell. And the empire is just, being a human being, it's just holding off entropy. So it's the default is everything's going to fall apart and everything's going to go wrong and it's all going to be agony and horror and this sort of hellish fear as being the default situation is still very much in our culture. And therefore it takes you work. It's a hard work to begin to even entertain the third noble truth of the Buddha's teaching, that the reality of things is nirvana. And the suffering that we experience comes from our not knowing that reality. That's what ignorance means. It means not knowing something. Or, more actively, it means misknowing it, which is my favorite word for it. And it is in the ancient dictionary, but nobody ever uses that. And we use misunderstand, but we don't say misknow. But we could, You know what it means when you hear it. So we misknow, and deep in our misknowing is that we're just sort of holding the dike against the horrible reality that's going to come and get us, That's what makes people uptight. And it's part of our culture to be made uptight so that governments and priesthoods can control us. And it's not just the West. Asia is the same. Buddha was rebelling against that. And then he discovered confirmation of that rebellion in his enlightenment. And then a lot of people thought well, we don't know. We won't know unless we become a Buddha. Buddha means you then know. But short of that, you don't know for sure. But it's more reasonable. Actually, if you think about it, you can that the default is okay. And that it's good. If you have to let it all go, it'll be all right. And actually, that would then fit with your personal experience, isn't it? When someone asks you, did you really enjoy such and such a thing? Do you not say occasionally, all too rarely, I'm afraid, yeah, I was really blown away? We say that. So what does that mean? That means we sort of let go our worry. We let go our dissatisfaction. We let go our frustration. We sort of let go of stuff, right? Then we call that blown away. There's a bad thing where in some gangster movie, I blew him away. That's a terrible thing. But that's like another kind of blown away. And actually, if you read the near-death literature, people who die and then are revived, for whatever reason, often, who make a report, you often hear they didn't want to come back. So they met some guy, Jesus, Buddha, Mrs. Jesus, Mrs. Buddha, whatever. They said, not your time yet. Oh no, back on the operating table after the auto accident, being patched up, a lot of you can find a lot of accounts like that because death is like a big letting go. If you know French, you know what the expression "the little death" means, I believe. Le petit mort. You might know if you know French. If you don't, I'm not translating. Okay, in an Dharma center. So my point is that the fact that reality, when you let it all go, might be okay, is something that fits with some aspect of our experience. So then you begin to entertain, maybe I'm wrong in feeling so worried about everything all the time. And maybe the worry itself is one of my sources of my problem and this and that. And you might begin to try to think of changing your culture. Because, His Holiness, Dalai Lama, asked me years ago, and my wife, he didn't quite realize he was asking my wife, but lucky for him he was, because she did the whole work. Made this Tibetan cultural center called Tibet House, modeled on one that they made in India, in Delhi. And then since we've done it, there's now one in Frankfurt, and we helped them in Mexico City, and there's even one in Moscow, but they don't have a place yet. Putin shut them down, etc. There are a bunch of them around the world. About the Tibetan culture, because Tibetan culture embedded this feeling that the default of things is good, basically. And actually even more mainstream, some subcultures in India did it, but in the other so-called Buddhist countries, nobody that we know of, I mean the Shakya kingdom did it in Buddha's time, his own city-state kingdom, they did. And certain parts of India, I think, at different times during the 1500 years or 1600 years when Buddhism was very alive component of Indian civilization, a constitutive component which they've forgotten actually nowadays, but it is. It's palpable if you study it. And I think the various subcultures went sort of mainstream, you could say, with the Buddhist thing. Because one of the drawbacks in history of having a culture where you feel the default is good and people are less uptight and more happy is they become less well defended militarily, because they at least cease to honor so much the Hector, Achilles, Rambo archetype, you know. And then other more uptight cultures come and beat them up. That's been the pattern in history, like happened to Tibet and even Mongolia, which Tibet and Mongolia were like America, both big conquerors, you know, like post-World War II America, you know, Pentagon America, you know, huge budget of military, right? And they were like that once. And then they decided to mainstream happiness. And guess what? They got more happy. And they like Tsampa. They have a great time with their Tsampa. They do. And they had to kill animals, yaks, because they're of the nomadic culture, some aspect, but they don't kill so many of them. They have a little bit, they have like prosciutto, yak prosciutto. They don't gobble down yak every day, 3 meals a day, and like kept like weird, like cancer, you know, which is like meat indigestion. In one aspect of it is protein excess, you know, like diabetes is sugar excess. And they got too cheerful, and they gave up their conquering armies, and their warrior heroes became happy geishalas, cheerful, instead of fighting kambas, you know. And there's still a few fighting kambas, and they're not perfect. There's a lot of tough kambas. They pride themselves on being tough, right? Look, they're chuckling, Tibetan. They're very wild. But happiness means you become, okay, yeah, whatever, you know. It doesn't mean you run out and invite people, your neighbors, to come and kill you. But it means death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. You're aware of that. If you're totally in love, if you're totally open-minded, you guaranteed you're going to be more open in your next embodiment. You're going to be happy. That's your reality system. You do, and you get more. And although in history that's been bad for cultures, then the Tibetans inflicted this on the Mongolians, who had the biggest empire, most ferocious, and the Mongolians became more manipulative. You know, the Manchus, when they ran Mongolia in the 19th century, they confiscated temporarily when they came to Urga, which was like the Lhasa of Mongolia, you know, all the temples and the monks. They would confiscate their herds, because if they went in with all their wealth, they would give it all away to the monks and the lamas, and then they'd be destitute, and then people would have to worry about them. They were so much into generosity, and so detached, you know, and they had so much joy of giving that their generosity was impractical. And that's a good thing. I think maybe the Manchu officials stole some while they were keeping it, but they protected them from their excessive generosity, the Mongolians, in the last period. You know? And so people get really happy, then they get like nice. You know, Buddha. You know what a Buddha land is? When you become a Buddha, you will have your own Buddha land, all of you. And if you met Shakyamuni, crowds would come to him and he would predict, your name will be such and such, your Buddha land will be called such and such. He would do what they call Vyakarana, Lungtemba. He would tell them what it would be, because he knew the future for them. He knew that it doesn't mean he controlled it or anything, or anybody controls it, but he could see how it would work. That's what an enlightened mind is like. And people loved that. It made them feel good, you know. And your Buddha land, what a Buddha land is, which is this unbelievable thing, is where everybody loves everybody else. That's an ideal way to be, isn't it? You give up loving more especially one person, namely yourself. You still love yourself, but not more than everybody else. And then you realize everybody else is really great, and you love all of them. Okay? Doesn't mean you molest them. It means you just like them. They look beautiful to you, you know? They look wonderful to you. That's what a Buddha, and everyone feels that way with everybody. Therefore, a Buddha land, in the Vimalakirti Sutra, which I recommend to everyone, they read, especially my translation is really good. But I don't even get a royalty, so don't worry. You can read it for free on the 84,000 website. You know, the translating the Kanjur website. You can go and read it for free. I gave it to them. And in that, there's a place where Buddha gives a description of the Buddha land. He says the land itself is made of generosity, it's made of ethics, it's made of tolerance and patience, it's made of wisdom, you know, he goes on like that. And then Shariputra, the monk, a head monk, Arhat, he says, give me a break, how can that be? If that's so, then Shakyamuni, he's here now, he's the Buddha, and he's here in India now with me, and this land sucks. This is not a perfect land of wisdom. And he must have been a really crappy bodhisattva. He thinks. And Buddha reads his mind, of course, and says, you know, Shakyamuni, is it the fault of the sun and the moon that those blind from birth have never seen them? And so he starts getting after him like that. And then he puts his toe on the ground, apparently, after, you know, he teases Shariputra about not seeing the beauty of the world, of Shakyamuni's world, which we're still in, actually. This is still Shakyamuni's Buddha land. You know what it's called? In Sanskrit, it's called Saha. This planet is called the planet Saha. Saha means tolerable, in the meaning of just barely tolerable. And then they say in the sutra later, they say Shakyamuni lets it stay like that. He could shape it into more paradisal type of thing, but he lets it stay like that because Buddhahood involves not only cultivating wisdom, you know, in a paradise where everyone's supported to meditate all the time and study and read Nagarjuna, and everybody will become enlightened with wisdom. It also needs compassion, and to develop compassion, you have to be near beings that are suffering, and you have to be open to that suffering and help them heal that suffering. So that's part of the evolution to becoming enlightened, not just meditating and knowing, okay? At least that's the argument of that sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra. But anyway, I describe it, he doesn't describe it like that in the sutra, but I describe it as John Belushi food fight universe. Because in this one, I have my pint of Swami Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And how much am I going to share with those people? You know, how many spoons am I going to take? You know, that's the way we are. And in that one, everyone wants everyone else to have their ice cream. So it's like a food fight. You're not grabbing your own mousse au chocolat, but everybody's giving you their mousse au chocolat. So everybody ends up covered with chocolate. That's how I describe it. Sort of a little more sweet tooth oriented. So my point is that there is such a concept in Buddhism. Because when you become a Buddha, right, you vow you will not be a Buddha until everyone is free of suffering, right? How do you get out of breaking that vow? How did Shakyamuni get out of breaking that vow? Did you ever think about that? He got to be Buddha, and I don't think I'm free of suffering. So how did he get out of that? What did he do? Has anybody got any suggestions? What? Did he abandon us all? He didn't? Why not?
Because he still loves us regardless of what we are, but his perception of what we are and could be
Okay, okay, yeah, but the thing is, it says, I won't attain freedom from suffering, that is nirvana, enlightenment, until everyone has attained it. But it just because he loves us, that he wants us to attain it, that would not be right unless you add one component. No, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just taking it a little further. You ask, what?
Because you talked about the field mind.
The what?
You talked about the field mind. He's also very much aware of the suffering everybody else is going through, so he's still got that connection to the suffering.
Well, wait. When you're ready, I'll tell you something. That's okay. That's okay. The point is that one of the names of Buddha is Dusun Khyampa, Triyadvajna. He knows the 3 times, and actually is present in all 3 times. So Buddha, to time, we're stuck in an illusion where we think we're only in a present moment, even though, and the past is gone and the future is not here, even though we can't find the present, actually, if we really look. It always eludes you. You can't find it. So where are we? I mean, we're half in past and half in future, or like what? Where are we in time? But anyway, we think we're isolated in a moment, apart from past and future. But a Buddha, part of Buddhahood is not just being infinite in space and identifying with all beings. They're like precious child, but also in all moments of time. So then to Buddha, our future Buddhahood, your future Buddhahood, right back there sitting in the air conditioner there, your future Buddhahood is completely present to Buddha when he becomes Buddha. And the reason he becomes Buddha is that then he can guarantee that the distance in your own sense of time, which is a sequence of things, where you're separated from your future, is minimal. In other words, he can shape things around you. He can't force you, but he can't bomb you into bliss. You can't bomb people into bliss. But he can shape the situation to encourage you to the best understanding, the best choices, the best actions, the best karma, so that you'll get there in the optimal evolutionary speed. Because in a way, he sees you as already there, so hasn't abandoned you. You follow? It's like the doctor who sees you healed while you're groaning on his table there, because he sees it's going to happen. And then that guy has the best placebo effect, best bedside manner for you, doesn't he? The one who can see your health. When you feel the vibe of that. They can say it and they don't see it, and it won't affect you. You won't get a placebo out of it. But when they really see it, that's a really great healer. So that's the answer to that. Is that the time he's not trapped in the illusion. He's everywhere in time. He, it, whatever Buddha is, everywhere in time. But the point, I'm only making the point because I'm trying to say that actually everything's fine. That's what I meant about all right already. If we knew, and then we don't know, so we're going to try to find out. And we're encouraged that we can find out. And then we will really see the beauty of everything, right? Already, even though we're not Buddhas yet. And we have like eyeglasses and whatever, You have a nice string, keeping them on, I like that. Okay, so unwanted for me and my friends are suffering, contempt, harsh words, and disrepute. For enemies, it is just the opposite. We're happy. We're happy when they have disrepute and harsh words and suffering, contempt, right? Cause for happiness sometimes happens, but causes of suffering are very many. But without suffering, there's no transcendence. So, my mind, you must be brave. Shantideva speaks to his own mind. Now, so that I think all that, I don't know if I got it quite right, Geshe-la can always correct me or correct it for you, but I think that up to there, it is sort of the basic summary of everything, the Shantideva's insight about loving, not hating your enemy, so that you can come around to loving your enemy, so that you don't hate him. So then he begins on these 3 levels of tolerance or patience. The first one is I call it the no pain, no gain one, or tolerant patience, right? When something bad happens to you, you take that adversity as an advantage, where you make yourself stronger and more tolerant and more patient, using the adversity as a positive thing. So it sounds a little like masochism, actually, but there is an element of that. Like, when you train, when you go to the gym, as you get older, you better, do a stationary bike or do walking, and it's a little bit painful to you, but you happily do it because you know it's helping you, and then you have less pains of other kinds when you move around, right? Couch potatohood is very destructive to health and longevity, as you know, everybody tells you. And so there's a whole bunch of verses on that, about that. He's this one, he says, pointlessly, penitence and flagellance endure the sensations of cuts and burns. Why then, my mind, are you afraid to suffer for the sake of freedom? So this is the beginning of the sort of no pain, no gain thing. Here there is nothing that does not become easier to bear through constant practice. Thus, by practicing with little pains, you should learn to endure great pains. This is building up your tolerance. Who has not experienced this with accidental pains, bites of insects and of snakes, pains of thirst and hunger and so on, and irritations such as rashes, etc. So it goes on like that up to about 20, 30 verses where he ends saying, although they experience sufferings, the wise don't let the mind cloud or agitate. In making war on the addictions, the battle will bring much harm. Actually, this is the word klesha, hatred or anger, or hate anger, she dang, is called klesha in Sanskrit and nyomung in Tibetan. And people translate that, I originally did also, as affliction. But in a way, affliction is the result. Klesha is something that causes affliction. It causes pain. It's a cause rather than the suffering itself. And so actually the perfect word is addiction. Why things are addictive is that you get a rush for them initially, but then you need more and more of them, and it's not satisfying, and then they harm your health, And this kind of emotion is an addiction. How does hatred arise? When you feel frustrated, it's because something's happening you don't like, something's not happening you do like, someone's blocking it, and you become frustrated. And so you're feeling weak. So in your moment of weakness, your own voice comes to you saying, if you blow up, you'll be strong. And then you do get a rush of seeming strength out of blowing up. But actually you make it worse inevitably because you have no judgment. You lose your good judgment. And then you want more, and you feel also exhausted emotionally right away afterwards. So therefore martial artists, kung fu, tai chi, all these kind of things, karate, you train to not become angry with your opponent, to develop forcefulness about the opponent, but without any kind of, because anger brings imbalance and you'll lose, you'll be thrown, Judo, all those disciplines operate on this understanding, actually, that anger makes you weaker, but makes you feel stronger for a short time. And so that's its addictiveness. So addiction is perfect, If you say affliction, it means that you just pain right away, but actually people get angry because they think they're shoving off the pain on someone else. And they feel a kind of release about it. But it never works. So addiction is a really good word. So in making war on the addictions, the battle will bring much harm. In other words, when you really try to overcome it, it will. Disregarding all sufferings, conquering enemies such as hate, these are the truly victorious heroes. The rest just slaughter corpses. That's as a resonance with the Bhagavad Gita, actually, that line. There's a lot of lines in Buddhist teachings that are connected to the Bhagavad Gita, that are used there. And some aspects of the Bhagavad Gita are really countering Buddhism, though, because Arjuna is like Shakyamuni when he renounces the kingship. He wants to renounce the battle, in the Bhagavad Gita. And then God tells him, Krishna tells him, no, you have to go fight, you're a warrior. Just like Buddha's father sends people, Brahmins, to Buddha and tells him, you've got to come back and you've got to serve the people, blah, 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 And Buddha resisted. So the Gita actually has a little bit of a worry about Buddhism. that they're going to lose their soldiers, the Indian people. That's why Buddhism never became absolutely mainstream throughout India. It remained countercultural, in other words, even though it had a huge impact. But in Tibet, mainstream. That's the greatness of Tibet. Okay, now this next thing is what's called the patience of knowing reality. So that's where when someone hits you with a stick, you're not angry with the stick. You're not angry with their fingers. You're not angry with their forearm. You're not angry with their shoulder. You're angry with their anger, their intentional wish to hurt you. So your mind even still discriminates. So here that you just push that further in this one, and you see that they are driven by anger, and they're a helpless tool of their anger. So then you're only angry with anger, right? And there's a whole bunch of verses on that. And that's really where you're bringing in the wisdom. And that's the wisdom of analysis of things and being aware, which your mind has all the time. Wisdom in Abhidharma, in basic Buddhist psychology, every human being has wisdom all the time in their mind, in the power of discernment and discrimination. That's why when Buddhism is taught wrongly, as just don't think, and you're practicing Buddhism, that's really wrong, and that's bad. There's a level where you reach beyond where thinking can reach, but you get there by thinking wisely, by thinking accurately, by thinking realistically. You don't get there just by shutting down surface manifestation of thinking. That actually cripples your ability to develop human discernment and critique. So that's why a good Geshe-la, you go and say, I want to meditate. And he will say, well, on what? What are you going to learn to meditate on? Rather than, just go blank out your mind, you'll be fine, That's a mistake, actually. And Buddhism is too much taught like that. And that's why, I said that last night. I guess, was everybody here last night? I don't want to repeat anything I said. A lot of people were not here last night? Few people were. Well, then, you just have to forgive me that. Mostly not. If you meditate on your misknowing, on your ignorance, ignorance will become sharper. It'll become stronger. You'll become more egotistical. More mind will be one-pointed on your self-cherishing, on your self-preoccupation. And it will harm you, actually. If you meditate in such a way that you just block your thinking, you'll become more dull-minded. It will feel strenuous to think. You won't feel like thinking. You will, therefore, and you'll get a buzz out of it, though. You'll feel a little different because you're thinking a lot. And that's why everybody, too many people in translating Buddhist texts, they constantly talk about training. The definitions. Buddhism, textual Buddhism is called the three baskets. I'm sure you all heard this. Practical Buddhism, realizational Buddhism, Adhigama Dharma it's called, is the three higher learnings, Adhishiksha, Lama, the three higher educations, really, is what they are. But nobody ever translates them that. They translate them as the three higher trainings, precisely because of this wrong idea that what Buddhism is helping us learn not to think. So that's why you couldn't be educated. He wouldn't be interested in educating you, because he doesn't want you to think, supposedly. That's wrong. That's not what Buddha wants. He wants you to think more sharply, more deeply. That's what he wants. Eventually, when you think really deeply, you'll reach a space beyond thinking, maybe, of a certain type. Because it will totally be your, sophisticated. Everyone here is a genius. Everyone is Einstein, not just that one guy with a weird hairdo. Everyone is a genius. Every human being is a genius. Some neuroscientists, they used to say, someone correct me, but they used to say that we only use 8% of the brain, but all the rest of it is redundant. I've read that somewhere. I don't know if they're still into that. I hope not, but they used to say that. Someone could correct me if that's obsolete, but they used to say that. And the kicker that I thought was really special is that women's brains are more redundant than men's. That is so stupid. I can't believe it. Really, it goes against all their big evolutionary thing. Well, why would, it must have been strenuous for all those little genes running around, click, 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 clicking around to elaborate all this incredible bunch of neurons. So why make some bunch of extra neurons? Well, of course, maybe you only use 8% of your brain on the throughway, getting off at the right exit. Yeah, if that's what we are, we're the inhabitants of little beetles. Like a beetle goes through a dung pile, and we go on a throughway, bzzz, go around like that. But we use our brain for a lot of other things. And everyone is a genius. Everyone has a supercomputer in there. And, you can become blissful by your brain. And your whole body is your brain anyway. It goes all up and down your spine, all the chakras and all this kind of thing, So it's too silly. So everyone can know this reality, and we do anyway do it. We all have this incredible intelligence. And, thus if I see my enemy or friend do something wrong, I will keep my good cheer, thinking this comes from mechanical conditions. This person is just, like helplessly being driven by some instinct or some misknowledge or some brainwashing or by Fox News. They really just don't know, they can't help themselves, And then you won't be personalizing your thing. So that's the second one. It's called the one that the tolerance that knows reality. I think I forgot what it is, in Tibetan, Sheva or something. Then the third one is the tolerance of non-retaliating, and this I think is forgiveness. And this is then beginning to verge toward love, loving the enemy. We're finally getting there. And that's the one where you really reach the point, which, as I said, normally when you reach Shantideva, you can't get it, because you reach the point where you'd rather die than give yourself over to the enemy, which means anger. So rather than lose it, you'd rather die. And because you want to, you therefore identifying with your loving mind, your compassionate mind, and you want to be your compassionate mind, and you're not going to even consider your holding on to the body more important than holding on to your compassionate mind. And that's not possible. That makes no sense if all you are is your body. Okay? So that's why I wrote the Infinite Life book, is to try to make the argument about and I just was given a book yesterday by the people over at Wisdom, which I think is really far out, and I haven't read it fully. I read a little bit last night. It's called Rebirth in Early Buddhism and Current Research by Bhikkhu Analayo. This one, yeah. It's really interesting, and one of the main phenomena in it is a 3-year-old Sri Lankan kid who, at 3 years of age, started chanting Pali Sutras, which are versions of Pali Sutras that don't accord with the ones in the canon. But this guy, as a scholar, compared them to translations into Chinese and Tibetan, which are from Pali, which are correct. So, in other words, couldn't have learned them from even some monks there in Sri Lanka by the age of 3, or period, because they didn't have those versions of these sutras. But they did exist in the past because they were translated into Chinese and Tibetan. And this 3-year-old just starts to chant them like, 100 pages without even thinking. And then remembers he was such and such, and then he has all the phenomena about how he remembers what monk, what monastery he was, and whatever, and everything, and then lost it by the age of 8. So he gets into all these kind of phenomena in the sense of, let's undo this notion that we have about the realism of no future life, and the sort of fantasy or religious superstition about that we are beings who are endless and beginningless beings. We all are. Every one of you has did you ever watch Cosmos? Some older people here might have ever watched Carl Sagan's version of Cosmos. you know, the science popularizing TV series he did, which was so fun. And he had one thing that he would do. I don't know if he did it repeatedly, but I remember it was one where he walks on a cosmic calendar, which is, you know, the genes up from the Precambrian slime, and he gets finally to the last 3 minutes of midnight, and then that's when human beings start, you know, and he goes, how wonderful, billions and billions of genes and, you know, molecules, and he really, about what a miracle a human being is, even in a materialist sense, which is great. That's also great. But what's not great about it is it's not you personally. You're not even there. And he isn't even there. Because they're so bent on escaping from the church, you know, from the 18th century, that they can't dare have a soul, you know. So the genes are doing all right, but still they're aware of the miraculous nature of the human being, you know. And so the third level of it is where you even feel bad that your enemy, you know, personal enemy, hurt you, that you were in the way of that person, and then they got the bad karma of hurting you. And you feel sorry that you take responsibility that your presence caused them to hurt you. It's really extreme, but it's very profound. And it's something people really freak out about. Like when something happens to you, if you blame others for it, and they may be at fault, but if your main focus is blaming them, you are in the weakest possible position, actually. It's a very interesting thing about Buddhist realism, realistic psychology. If you blame others, you can't do that much about them, you know? You can't do anything with them. Even you kill them, they'll get you later, or their relatives will, you know? And so you're very weak. But if you blame yourself, you can do something about it yourself. You know, okay, maybe I looked in the wrong way at that person. Maybe I was not, maybe I didn't know ahead of time, like 4 years, 10 wrong turns beforehand, that's what happened, and etc. In other words, you can change yourself. You can't really change the outer world. Shaking your fist at God, it doesn't do any good, you know. And actually, you know, God asked Buddha to tell people that it wasn't God's fault when bad things happen to them. It's their own karma, you know. And you never blame another person when they get harmed. You don't go say, oh, you have bad karma. You never do that. But if a person knows this technique of using adversity and using harm as an advantage, as an evolutionary growth energy, as a positive thing themselves, then they learn that they take responsibility for everything that happens to them. Then they can change themselves to become and build this power of immunity to harm, you know, that will overwhelm it. I know it sounds really dreadful. It's terrible, but that is the insight, actually. That's the insight of true forgiveness, you know. Like you forgive people for yourself. It benefits the forgiver. It doesn't change the person. And actually, once you're capable of forgiving anybody for anything, then you might be a judge and actually try to correct them. Because you would be capable of not correcting them, of just absorbing whatever it is. But then it's bad for them to hurt you. And it sort of comes to that, you know. Then you have a true motive. You know, and this is not just Buddhism. I wrote a book on anger, which was among the 7 deadly sins, and I was deeply offended that Oxford Press insisted I do the anger book. I said, why are you picking me for that? Why can't I do gluttony? Or lust, you know? What's this anger thing? Oh, you have to do anger. So there were 7 different authors in that one. But in doing it, I read the Stoics, Seneca. I read not only about Jesus, but I read about Rabbi Hillel and all kinds of rabbinical other rabbis. I mean, Jesus was a rabbi himself, actually. You know, newsflash to the Protestants. He was a rabbi. And then there were a lot of other great rabbis in those centuries that were teaching that kind of teaching, too. And although they weren't taking Jesus as a Messiah for them, but they were still teaching the same kind of thing themselves. And they all are teaching that kind of thing, that you take responsibility and you turn yourself around, and then you become immune to harm, actually. You develop a type of being that, you know, that cannot be harmed, actually. Yes, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, how does that apply?
What's that?
How does that apply if somebody has been experiencing anger from genuine victimhood? If somebody's
Please speak. You're talking to a hearing challenged person. Please say again.
if
Slowly.
somebody's anger
Yeah.
from having been in a genuine victimized state,
Yes.
a child, right? How does that apply to that? Or if somebody
Wait, your child is bitten by a snake, then how do you apply that at that moment, you're saying?
I mean, I'm saying if somebody is a victim of child abuse, or if somebody has
Oh.
an experience of being physically attacked,
Yeah.
in a genuinely victimized way, how is it helpful to think for that victim to think of themselves as accepting, I don't remember what the scripture is, but there is a scripture that says taking all blames unto oneself. Right?
Well, how it helps is that person then says, the important thing that I can do out of this thing is myself become someone who could not be abused. To myself become someone and who would not hand it on to anyone else. In other words, whatever negative energy one was afflicted with, one would use that to transform oneself with the primary motive. And one could even forgive anything ever done to one. It would not be like, whatever. It doesn't mean that person, the other person who done it, might not need correction not to do that. So in other words, it's like people, there's a film made, a documentary that I used to go to the Bar Association in New York for people who were against capital punishment. And they have made documentaries and things. And they did studies of families who lost a loved one to a murder. And the two types of families. The one that gets closure, as they say in Fox News and other media, by seeing their other person killed, the murderer killed, or wants to, or then lobbies to get it happen and so forth. And then the other one who goes and meets the murderer and talks to them and deals with them, and tries to find out why they were so stupid and did that and whatever, and ends up forgiving them. And the two sides, of course, they're making the documentary for a reason, so they're biased maybe, but the two sides, the family that is forgiving is really better off. And they're much happier, put it that way. The family that's just got to get that, counter murderer murdered is much more wretched, actually. And then they have this big frustration that closure wasn't really closure.
But it's not that they're accepting the blame for the
What? Well, they're not taking it as extreme because they're not living in a multi-life reality in our culture. But they're just, everything has to be rectified for this life, But I'm saying you're gaining strength if you take responsibility, if you were harmed. I'm saying this is a deep insight, actually. Because what else are you doing with the harm, In other words, this is, if you can't do anything about it, what good does it do to be upset about it, right? That verse of Shantideva. If you can do something about it, what good does it do to be upset about it? That means if you were capable of being injured in any way where you wouldn't be angry, right? Turn the other cheek, like Jesus said, Buddha said, hatred never ends by hatred. Only by love can it be ended, or non-hatred. There are different versions. And you are gaining strength, evolutionary strength, by not externalizing your reaction and putting it against making yourself better no matter what. That's how you do it. But then if you do that, it will change your motivation in dealing with injurious people. And you might still deal with them in an objective manner, critical manner. It's bad for them to go around injuring people, even themselves. Even, killing, surgical violence of killing is allowed, in a sense, in karmic ethics to some extent if it prevents a larger amount of killing. It's a kind of slippery slope thing, but it's surgical, like the snake thing I was going to say. If it was a snake, you immediately do some violent thing, which is you cut your arm, suck blood out, you do surgery. If necessary, if it's some really fatal thing, you might amputate your own hand. Like that guy who was stuck under a boulder in the wilderness and had to saw his hand off with a Boy Scout knife. That's a nasty thing to do, to cut your hand off, but it saved his life. So it doesn't prevent you from doing practical things like that, but the point is the motive You don't give yourself over to how evil that child abuser was, how they should be this, and you don't go on witch hunts, you know what I'm saying? You become a being that is open even to injury. That is the wisdom of Buddha, Jesus, all these great teachers, actually, and Shantideva. And especially in the multi-life evolution, personal evolutionary framework. It's an evolutionary framework. Darwin, by the way, is not a big deal for Buddhists. The people who do creationism and who hate Darwin and are freaking out in Texas and other places, they don't want to be related to people of other races, and they don't want to be related to women, the men, and they don't want to be related to monkeys, right? So they're frightened of that. So then God, if you've ever seen the diorama in San Diego of the mega church people, the fundamentalists, they have Adam. And he's a blonde hair, blue-eyed. He's Lion King, like this. He has like a bandage on his rib. And it only happened 7,000 years ago. And a white guy from the beginning, I mean, it's just so stupid. But Buddhists are fine about that. Not only are we related to chimpanzees, we were chimpanzees, all of us. We were crocodiles. We were whatever. And males were females. Females were males. And we were all different kind of humans too. We were also bad guys. We're, the id. We all have this. When Buddha remembered infinite previous lives at the event horizon of enlightenment, he remembered he had been everything, because beginningless means there's no limit. So that means he'd been bad guys too, himself. So, how does it relate to this kind of conditions of injury? You may react to, you may defend yourself, you may do things to defend others, but your motive will be so different. You will not lose your good cheer. You will become a being that cannot lose its good cheer no matter what. This gives you much greater strength, and it leads you to a much better place in your rebirth, actually. It's very much a key thing, instead of getting down there and slugging it out with the crocodiles, I mean, if you're there just to defend yourself in life, you chose a really wimpy equipment as a human being. You have no claws, you have no fangs, you can't eject poison, etc. Of course, you can think up nuclear weapons and things like that if you do wrong, make mistakes, but you personally don't have really very good equipment. So, and you're not really, in the between state, or your genes they're not really thinking, I'm gonna go make up a human so I can destroy all the elephants with a nuclear weapon. That's not, the genes didn't think that, actually. The selfish gene did not make that calculation. Only the British Empire made that calculation. Okay, so that, I think that's how you apply. The point is, what does life become if your moment as a human being now is you are at an evolutionary platform. You have an opportunity to control your evolution and only have it be positive for yourself and all of those that you love, and even to discover that maybe you love everybody. You have that opportunity. And do you want to take that opportunity, or do you want to just slug it out with whatever unfortunate manifestation comes your way? Okay? The karma thing is wonderful for families. You mentioned abuse of children. The child in this country, at puberty, they say, I didn't ask to be born in this family. That's my life. Leave me alone, that kind of thing. I'm not going to clean up my room. Whatever, Well, you can say, yes, you did. You're here because you like us. You liked at least one of us. And you're here. So we have to work it out. Similarly, the parent doesn't think they own the child, because the child has what I call the third gene. They have a mental gene, or a spiritual gene, you could say, a soul gene. And they have their own experience in other families and other races and other dimensions, other planets, and that's not yours. You lent them equipment, a body, right? And then you lent them 40 years, or they think 13 years, but it's going to be 40 years of assistance. Maybe 50. I was shocked. I once went to a Waltz place in Florida, and my host there signed her parents' name on the the corn on the cob or whatever we had at the beach. And then they said, Yeah, we're allowed to sign our parents' name till we're 55. That's funny. I don't know. But then now I'm 75, and I know that happens sometimes with children. 55 is okay. Huh? That would be enough. So that's the thing. So okay. So anyway, oh yes.
The last thing he said, he quoted a line from the 7-point thought transformation.
Yes.
Place all the blame on the one.
Yeah, that's right. That's yourself. Yeah, that's the same thing.
Self-cherishing.
Yeah, that's right. But in a way, that self-cherishing means yourself, which self-cherishes, you know. So you blame it on, you put it on yourself. And of course, as you develop, you realize that, you know, then that goes along with the idea that your self-preoccupation, you know, then you jump into the compassion teaching, your self-preoccupation is your own biggest enemy. So even something happens, abusive happens to you, it gives you the chance to use the energy of reacting to this abuse to overcome your self-cherishing. And that is what benefits you most, actually, rather than just punishing and counter back to the abuser. But in a way, it's self-centered. To overcome yourself, to take that energy, to use it to improve yourself is in a way self-centered. But the, what?
Can the word blame be translated as responsibility?
Yes, same. It's the same thing. Sure.
I mean,
But when you're blaming someone else, you don't think, you're responsible. You don't really say that, but you feel blame. You feel the energy, but so you use the word blame. So then blame yourself is the idea. So yeah, that's when it comes to toward the really active compassion thing, where you then actually I was going to say about the killing thing. Part of the reason you're allowed to do surgical violence to prevent a killer from killing lots of other people is that the people who get killed, who would get killed if you didn't protect them, they lose their precious human life, which is very important to them evolutionarily. But the killer has almost a worse fate than them by having taken those human lives. They become more prone to really negative future in this life and negative future life. So you're also helping that person, by removing them from the ability to kill people. And you preferably don't, you know, like these cops are always shooting people to death 20 times in the back. You could try to shoot them in the leg or something if you're really scared, you know. Why they always have to shoot them in the head or the heart or something, you know? You know, like they're doing target practice, you know. They could, you know, I think you could knock over a guy who was like brandishing a cell phone. Why did they shoot him in the ankle? That's annoying surgery, but you know, they're alive. You know, I don't know why they don't train them like that more, you know. So anyway, yeah, I think we made that point. So now loving the enemy. So love just means the sensible part of love the enemy in that other book that Sharon Salzberg and I wrote, at least my part of that book. The sensibility of that advice is that your enemy is your enemy because they think that you are in the way of their happiness. That's why they're an enemy of yours, you know, another person who doesn't like you. They're your rival, your whatever, some distorted person, or handing on some family lineage of abuse or something like that. They see the way you are as somehow making them unhappy, so then they abuse you or they harm you or hurt you. If your enemy was happy without abusing you, why would they bother to abuse you? So love, if you take love as meaning the wish for the happiness of the beloved being, then it makes perfect sense to love your enemy. Because then that means you want that enemy to be happy. So once they're happy, why would they be an enemy of yours? Do you follow me? It actually is very practical. And it relates to this issue that in psychology nowadays there's a big debate about altruism, saying that there's no such thing because altruism benefits the altruistic person. So therefore it has a self-centered component. But that's just being attuned to the paradox, isn't it? The fact that there's such a thing as enlightened self-interest is a good thing. It makes you more strongly altruistic because you get something out of it. Namely, you feel, that's what that is. You namely feel that, so it gives you a double motive, it intensifies your motive, right? So that's okay. Everything is a paradox like that, you know. When you don't wish to be happy, you will get more happy, right? When you are happy is when you don't wish for anything else. That's when you're happy. So by wishing to be happy, you don't get happy. So not wishing to be happy, you get happy. So you have to wish not to wish. And we know that. It's not, but it doesn't, you know, that's why language can only take us so far. But it can take us up to that kind of inexpressibility that we know is reality, you know. Anyway, so that's the thing. No. Yes. Bukela. Kela tos kulgumdo. No. Bukela, yeah. Kondo. Like Yula. Simjenda. Yes.
Where that come from, the suffering.
Okay, yeah, Kondo comes from suffering.
Yeah.
Los.
Right.
Duman le tangiori. Los.
Like example, the Western language, do we agree with ourselves?
Should we be angry to ourselves, you
Yeah.
think? Well,
Yes, right.
yeah, in a way.
But
We do.
The text that we don't say, right?
But what?
The Tibetan text,
Yes.
we don't say you can angry yourself. You're angry for suffering.
Yes.
You're angry with sentient beings. You're angry with where suffering come from the place.
Yeah, okay.
But we say Westerners say, are you guys
Here.
angry with yourself? Everyone says yes, right?
Yes. Here, Gela, come on, please tell us.
No,
No, because I can't
no,
hear
I'm
that.
done, I'm done.
Please.
We, sorry. Like Tibetan side,
Yes.
the text usually according to text we say
Yes.
angry, the object of the angry
Yes.
is suffering and sentient beings, and suffering comes from suffering. Where they come from suffering like that.
Right.
We don't say we are angry ourselves.
Right.
But the Western style we say we angry ourselves.
Right.
But how can we describe?
Yes, you mean like in guilt, what they
Yeah, we say control.
Yes, yes, yes.
But if you angry yourself, you are the object of the angry,
Yes.
right? But according to our text, say you are not object of the angry.
Yes.
You are,
According to tests.
yeah, text.
Okay.
The books, you know.
Okay.
But we say the in-laws, are you guys angry with yourself? Say yes, I am angry with myself.
Yes.
But text, then you are the object of the you angry.
Yes.
Is a contradictory of text.
Yes.
How you explain? I am very difficult that.
Well, you know, there is a level of that, you know, and which is the level that where, if you're angry at anger, then since anger wants to destroy its target, you want to destroy your anger. So if you want to destroy your anger, you can't be angry at anger. So then you have to take the energy of forcefulness, and you have to control it in a way, you know. And then we have the idea of fierce compassion, you know, like fierce deity. I never like to say wrathful deity, which people will say. I never like that, because they're not wrathful. They're showing the form of fierceness, but they're compassionate, actually. They are loving their object. It's like a yamantaka, right? Yama antaka means the terminator, the exterminator of the terminator. Because yama means death, so the death of death. So if death dies, no one dies, right? If you're angry at anger, then you don't get angry, period, right? Is that what you mean? So it's not really at yourself. You're angry at you're only angry at your own habit of being angry.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant?
No, maybe not that.
Oh, okay. Well, then please.
I think maybe I just ask you a question to like philosophy way. It's much busy. and maybe like a little bit. You know, you say,
Yes.
are you object of you angry? How you say?
Yes. Well, If
Yeah.
you're identifying with your
Yeah,
anger,
this is video correct.
if you identify yourself as your anger, when people get angry, they just say, that's just the way I am, that's me.
Yeah, exactly.
So they identify the anger with themselves.
But just say you're not angry yourself.
Technically,
The,
you're saying.
the object of the angry is not you.
It's not you.
Yeah. Even you say I'm angry myself, but
Yes.
we say, but text is there are only three objects:
Yes.
sentient beings, surfing, and
Wait, the three things, which are what?
the object of the angry.
Yeah, what are they three?
Three: suffering,
Suffering,
sentient beings,
sentient beings,
and it's not condition. It's just where they come from. What is that? Dunga kale shuwe shi.
gang juante.
Dunga kale shuwe ne.
Gunga gang shuwe.
Dunga kale shuwe ne. Dunga kale shuwe. Where it come from suffering?
Where suffering
The
comes from.
place from suffering.
The suffering comes from.
Yeah.
That's ignorance.
Yeah, therefore, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, you're angry, you're ignorant, suffering, and sentient beings. But
Okay.
you're not angry yourself.
Right.
But everyone say, I'm angry myself. But how can you,
Reconcile that.
yeah, how you,
That's because people are identifying themselves as their ignorance, actually. That's because they think that's what they are, people. People don't normally think what they are is their love. They think that they're like I said, like I said, Geshe Wanga used to say, people think that they're the one, they have a fixed self, like Rawang Genji, right? Tsuktupe, da yote. So people identify themselves as having a self-sufficient, independent, fixed thing. So then that is their ignorance, actually. That is a misknowledge, that's ignorance. So when you say angry with that, that's the source of suffering, right? So this, even your abuse, you see, if you use it to overcome the source of all your suffering, which is your false sense of self-identity, if and your habit of identifying with, you load that up, what Swami Nick said. I always jokingly call him Swami. We have a joke about it, which I'm not going to go into the detail, but he's my Swami in a way. So Swami Nick, he said that's in the mind practice or mind transformation or mind reform. Actually, people always call it mind practice, but Jong means to purify, so it actually means mind reform or mind purification. That we don't use the mind reform because it sounds like the communists. So we don't use that, but Jong means to purify, so mind purifying. So in that practice, of taking everything, blame yourself and everything, people say that, right? But what Geshe is pointing out, I think, and I finally got it, your real self. He's talking about the real self, and the real self is a relative self. So that's your living process, The real self is not this self-identity habit, which is just ignorance. It's not there, but we assume we think it's there. We base our life on it being there, and therefore we're preoccupied with the self all the time, and that's what shuts us down. And so that is the target of our evolution to achieve Buddhahood. Actually, it's a beautiful thing in Buddhist ethics, just to go to another place, which is that, modern ethics, like even my beloved Wittgenstein, he thinks ethics is just a choice for no realistic reason. You just choose to be good or not, and it might have a little social output causation in it, but there's no ultimate cause of it. It's reality does not push us to be good. But in the Buddha's teaching, if you take the scale of life to be the most self-isolated, to the most altruistic Buddhahood of being identified with all beings, being sort of a field of all life, which is what a Buddha feels they are, supposedly. If that's the case, then any action of your mind, speech, and body is either expanding your identification with a larger life or contracting it. So therefore, killing means you're saying that life is not connected to me. That being who has that body that I kill, that I take from that being, has no connection to me. So you're shrinking your sense of identification with an aspect of the whole field of life. And you kill many killings, and the more and more you shrink. And then the ultimate shrinkage state is hell, where you're just completely so defended you're completely isolated. Nothing can get to you because you're so paranoid, because everything, your vision of everything is so hostile. So therefore, there's an evolutionary purpose in saving life. When you save a life, you're saying, this life is connected to me. And there's all these things in cultures. When you save a life, you know, the person becomes your friend or your relative, something like that, and you're responsible for them. Subsequently, they're responsible for you to pay back. You know, there are all different versions of it. But you become connected with the being that you saved their life. Similarly, stealing from taking what's not given to you, is called stealing, and the opposite is giving to them. And so when you give to someone and then they enjoy what you gave to them, then you're somehow enjoying their enjoyment, and you've expanded and identified with them. When you take from them, you don't identify with their sense of having that thing. You follow? And then sexual thing, which usually is translated as adultery, but because in cultures where families are key, then you break up families. But it isn't only that, it's any kind of abusive sexuality. And that is a particular thing, because sexuality is when the human being biologically has an experience of merging with another, to whatever degree, you know, depending on many kind of circumstances. But that is the time when even the lesson of the interconnectedness of life happens to beings, and even in more than they counted on sometimes. Some other ones show up. and when everything, the gateways are open, you know? And so to use that to intensify your separateness from another person by using it abusively and harmfully toward them in whatever way is a real tragic thing in a sense. So ethics, and then the speech things are all telling lies, speaking divisively, making others divided against each other, speaking foolishly and senselessly, wasting people's mental space, and speaking harshly and using it as a weapon, speech. Those four things all have to do with greater expansion of identification or lessening of identification. And then the mind, you know, unfortunately, even the mind is doing evolutionary work. So when you are hating someone and maliciously scheming to harm them, then you're mentally creating separation from them rather than identifying with them. When you want their stuff greedily, you are ignoring their possession of it and not enjoying them enjoying their possession of it, and you scheming how to get it away from them. And then when you have this most unrealistic worldview about your self-identity is it, or there's an absolute that's there, or the other thing, you're disconnecting from causation, from being relational being, your real self, which is a relational, causally embedded being, right? And so ethics becomes really practical. And the word kushala in Sanskrit, you know, we say gewa and migewa, and we translate virtue and non-virtue. And kushala can mean that in Sanskrit, but it also has a meaning of skill, kushala and akushala in Sanskrit. You know, upaya kaushalya is a skill in method, you know, or means, famous concept of compassion, you know, being skillful in dealing with things, making them positive. So kushala means skill. And why would an ethical action be skillful? Well, because it expands your evolution, evolutionarily skillful. You're becoming a bigger being. And in an infinite field, a field of infinite possibility, it's quite brilliant, really. And it's a Darwinian theory, but it's a much more brilliant one, of all totally interconnected, you know. World of life, you know, and that Buddha wasn't even a Britisher. He didn't have a beard, and he came up with this interconnectedness of all life, which was what people like about the Darwinian thing, when it's not interpreted as meaning like, you know, kill my landlord. You know, like Eddie Murphy's famous joke, you know. You don't know that. That's a New Yorker thing. That was where Eddie Murphy made his start. C-I-L, kill my landlord. Eddie Murphy. Okay? So when you say that, then you mean you're talking about the real self. You don't want to be. You want the false self is what you're angry with ultimately. The self-identity, the ignorance. The Jungkung said in Maribara, Jungkung. It's ignorance.
But you are angry at ignorance, but not yourself.
Yeah, but people think that fixed self is them. So then they're angry with what they think their self is. So you were saying, but more hope. You're making it more hopeful that you're not really. You can't be angry with your relative self. You're saying. I agree with that. I think that's a good point. Very good point, because that relates to this kind of thing of guilt. People get into a thing in the West where they get all guilty, and then they get all crippled and paralyzed, and so then they can't get the idea of blame it all on the one. This striking idea that you should. Bodhisattva will never blame others for any sufferings they have. They won't. They'll say, I didn't help you enough or something. They'll always think that. So they won't go around saying that's just your karma. But if you yourself there's a famous work that I translated partially in my Circling the Sacred Mountain, called Lojong Tsunchakolo, the weapon of, or the blade wheel of mind reform. I translated, Lojong Tsunchakolo. And there, it's all, whatever bad happens to me is because I did something in previous life, It goes on and on with that. And, I will never, therefore, do such and such things. And all negative things, I take responsibility, I take blame for. And then that gives you tremendous power. And then you get into this, then it gets into this very fierce type of thing. You get into this thing where I'm going to destroy my real enemy, which is my ignorant sense of absolute self, which then releases my relative self. Point is, we never had an absolute self. So it's just getting rid of an illusion. It is not actually hurting ourselves, it's helping ourselves. But at first it might feel like it's a little bit self-damaging. Something like that. We'll do another question now. I think maybe I said enough. What time is it? Yeah. Yes. Oh, oh my God. Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
So my question is, if someone is angry at me,
yes.
I'm receiving my karma, or the suffering I experience is because of my karma. Is that correct?
If someone's angry with you?
Yeah, and the suffering I experience from that would be my karma?
Yeah, well, because the karma just means it's a causal process.
Okay, but my question is, I can't believe that the karma I experience is simply a neutral process, because in the way you describe how samsara ultimately is nirvana, and that virtuous aspect is something that is ultimately innate in all of us, and
Yes.
in the nature of reality.
Yes.
So I tend towards the belief that when I experience karma, it's occurring in the context of my growth, or in the context of my understanding.
Okay.
And
That's
so,
great.
Yeah. So would you say that is in accord with
That's a what?
Would you say that's in accord with the Buddhist teachings?
Yeah. In a sense that in this sense that karma is a causal process. So when you identify yourself as a wholly involved in a causal process, and you see through any illusion that there's anything separate in there that's yourself, which is not easily done, and I mean at the visceral level, not just the intellectual level is not so difficult in a way, but at the visceral level, then you have the realistic worldview. You will never be extremist and so on. So the unrealistic worldview is that there's something in the midst of it all that's me, that's a fixed thing, that's the real me, separate from it all, and my relation to all of this causality is problematic. Should I have a relation or not should I? And so much spiritual traditions, even within Buddhism and in what I call individual vehicle Buddhism, involves seeing the ultimate reality as a kind of escape from all of that connection. And nirvana is some other place that you leave and you're gone. That's a huge, even in Buddhism and all other traditions. Nirvikapa samadhi is some kind of total isolated. It's all just you, and you're not even you, so you don't feel bad about saying that. If you have a supreme self that is just disconnected from everything, and many traditions say that. And the Buddhist one, its deepest non-dualistic one, is Buddha is everywhere, not somewhere else. So your Buddhahood will be when you fully, viscerally experience, everything about you is interconnected with everything else, which seems like a crushing, overwhelming thing, doesn't it, at first? So therefore, it's only made possible by the fact that there's no suffering involved. You can't expand like that if it's suffering, type of thing. And the visceral, doing it viscerally is really very difficult. Because in a way, why you say the basic goodness, yes, but because of our fear of pain and all kinds of animal forms that we've inhabited in this infinite beginningless life sequence, we have sort of made a kind of all kind of artificial defense walls and defense mechanisms. And the big defense mechanism is that all this pain and difficulties don't get to the real me, because there's something absolutely separate about me, this separate identity, right? And Buddha's analysis uniquely as a psychologist, as a scientist, not as a religious person, as a scientist, he uniquely discovered the lack of such a thing in any relative thing. That's what emptiness means. Emptiness means radical relativity. Right? And then the surprise is that such a radical relativity, which we fear, because we fear being completely overwhelmed by relationality, but actually it's blissful when it's total and radical. Because there's no resistance in some kind of way. I don't know why. Isn't it? It's kind of amazing, isn't it? So people think emptiness means it's a place to escape to, like a nothingness. Amongst Buddhists, many misunderstandings of that. But actually emptiness, the great thing is emptiness itself is empty of itself. So it doesn't obstruct all the things, actually. But it clears away in the person that realizes that, clears away any non-openness within them. And then that's when they discover reality is good. In a visceral way, they experience it as good, somehow. And then when they do that, they become fully, a Buddha is a being who becomes fully responsible, you used the word, fully responsible for everything. And luckily they're capable, supposedly. But we'll be seeing soon. We're going to see in November. Because I think we've taught ourselves a lesson as a country of the taking everything in the worst possible direction that it could go, and to make ourselves aware that everything really does matter, and the people who have been half the people who've been sitting out the responsibility by not participating, by thinking they don't need to participate because it's all no good anyway. They're seeing it can be. Garrison Keillor's famous slogan, "It could be worse." And when you really realize at all times it could be worse, then you're definitely going to make it better. Don't you think? Imagine if we, like Sweden, had 95% voting in the United States. 95%. Like the Swedes. That's not something, they're a bunch of weird Vikings, but they all vote. And the Europeans in general, because they had a world war on their own land. So they definitely vote. Even though they can be corrupted by media, which they are at the moment, by the KGB. But still they vote. Okay, so it's noon. I think we're supposed to take a break. Any burning question anybody has about this horrendous paradoxes that we have uncovered deep in life? Yes, okay.
Question I've been thinking about for years.
Sorry?
The question I've been thinking about for years is,
Yes.
hope, you want to wish happiness on your enemy. That's what's loving you.
Yes, that's right.
Oh.
Wish your enemy to be so happy that they didn't bother you anymore.
Okay. How do I translate that into, and I'm going to use your example, our beloved president.
Yeah, our beloved president.
Who does not
we
stand
want
for
him
anything.
To go back to Mar-a-Lago and have all happiness there, and we want him to have really good sex therapy so that he does not have to grab all sorts of things he doesn't know how to make use of. And obviously has never enjoyed, so he always tries to grab more of them. And we want him not to have the responsibility of having to pretend that he doesn't like Mr. Putin. And we want him just to be happy. And we would like his wife to be happy, and his children and everyone, and did not have to have all this conflicts of interest and be the focus of so much negativity. And he would then, he would not, and we would like him to do it before his finances are investigated of the last 30 years, in which it just shows where he got all everything and how much laundering he did and what, and just go there and enjoy himself and be cool, take a little boat out and take a Caribbean or something. And that would be good. And stop blocking traffic on 5th Avenue and 56th Street. That would also be good. And that's his happiness. And then, but ideally, if it was revealed that the whole thing was kind of a scam, then maybe we could get rid of the governor of Wisconsin, who cheated, and the Secretary of State, who cheated the vote there, and Michigan, Pennsylvania, and all this crooked vote rigging that they do, which they then accuse others of in the big lie technique. And we would get rid of all that, and it would be revealed that actually she did win the election. She did a good enough job. She was an ideal campaigner. She isn't a slicky like Bill, but she did a good job, and she's a Wesley girl, and she wants to help everybody, and she's going to help them and the children. That would be the ideal, but that may not happen, but to that extent. But it will all happen if everybody exerts themselves, if everybody takes responsibility. To that extent it will happen, because the vast majority want to be happy in this country. So you can't be happy with some unhappy person spreading their unhappiness 24 hours a day on Twitter and every sort of social media and stirring you up. You can't. And he can't be happy. So the happiness is the key. Joy and happiness. It is. Not anger and hatred. Joy and happiness is the key. Then nobody will be killing all the monarch butterflies, and then Monsanto just sold itself to somewhere, and they can go and pollute some other place, and Mars or something. They all want to go to Mars. Get in one of the rockets and send all Monsanto off to Mars, you know. Stop messing with the butterflies and the bees, right? And we'll all be happy. And you look happy. You do. And you're here, and you're happy. But you eat more zamba, and you'll also be happy. Zamba will make you happy. Okay. So thank you very much for coming this morning. And I guess we'll do more things later in the day, right? Geshe-la's feeding me zamba and working me. So we're going to meet the young Tibetans in the afternoon, and then in the evening there's some kind of party, right? What is there? So then I have to go back to saving the world in the Catskills on Sunday. Okay? Thank you, everyone. All the best. Okay.
Please come back. Please live
Thank
long.
you. What's that?
Please live long.
What? Oh, thank you. Yes, I'll try.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great. Oh, somebody's calling. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. Oh, hello. Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, just a second. I'm just coming out of a talk.